What's going on, everybody in P0389? It's me, Alex, and today we're going to be talking about unfairness in the Canadian immigration system and what fair reforms could look like in Canada. Whether we like it or not, folks, immigration in Canada is not all sunshine and rainbows, and today I want to go through chronologically course material that demonstrates that there's deep Eurocentrism involved in Canadian immigration in terms of the selection and enforcement process. And later on, we're going to discuss possible reforms. Boom! In a student presentation in week 9, they discussed the powers that the CBSA used at their discretion when dealing with the claims of Sri Lankan asylum seekers arriving on Canada's shores in 2010. Leaders of the CBSA at the time were pushing for the agents on the ground to obtain incriminating information from the asylum seekers, knowing that there would be a language barrier between the two, essentially stopping their right to go through the asylum process after arriving in Canada. And this is essentially teetering on complete violations of the UNHCR and the 1951 Convention. And in the subsequent lecture, we learn that the IRPA, according to them, the visa can only be issued by the officer following their satisfaction that the foreigner is not inadmissible. But what kind of legal ambiguity is that? When is the officer officially satisfied? This is opening doors to loads of discrimination by personal immigration agents. Because look at it this way. What if the officer cannot be satisfied that an immigrant coming to seek asylum in Canada is not some sort of Houthi rebel, and they're not satisfied that they're not, therefore that blocks their way to coming into Canada? The SWAP program is something many of you have probably heard of because it's the clearest form of unfairness in the Canadian immigration system with the type of people it targets. Scholars in the Canadian immigration system that we looked at in week 10 have said that the SWAP program has created a distinct racialized labor force in Canada made up of immigrants. Now remember that this program is promoted as something that's available to everybody. Anyone can apply for this program, but it predominantly targets poor Black and brown people in the Caribbean. On top of this, people are forced to work in horrid conditions. They're sleeping in crowded bunks, often with minimal sanitation to keep the workers clean. And although these people spend months away from their family, legally residing in Canada, legally working in Canada, they're offered none of the protections given to Canadian workers, such as the right to healthcare and union representation. To make matters even worse, those that come to Canada multiple times over their lives, reside in Canada, legally work in Canada, are given no fast track to permanent residency or citizenship, despite them being the backbone of the Canadian agricultural sector. And it's no wonder why many people in Canadian immigration scholarlyhood are saying this is a modern form of slavery. Now, in the week 12 readings, we read about the point system used by immigration officials to determine someone's likelihood and success at gaining entrance into Canada. And this reform passed in 1976 was seen as the be-all, end-all of prior racist immigration policy in Canada. But what that week's reading revealed to us is that this simply reinforced prior Eurocentric aspects of Canada's immigration policy. The point system gave points out of 100 in different categories like English speaking ability, education, work experience, and tallied those points to the associated categories. For example, great English speaking ability is a 10 out of 10, and you need a 67 to pass. However, Yasmin Abu-Laban's work shows us that countries in Europe are already far more developed in terms of language and education skills for their general public. I mean, in reality, how can a country like Sudan be forced to compete with a European country like Romania in terms of education and language ability when coming to Canada? Abu-Laban's work illustrates that this simply reinforces favoritism in European immigrant candidates by favoring categories that they're more adapted to. This one's intimately related to the first topic I discussed in this video. We're going to try to keep it short. So in essence, Canada's federal government and CBSA agents put Chinese and Indian citizens on a red flag list because they somehow believed two countries with over 50% visa denial rates were conspiring to commit marriage fraud on Canadians. I think it's very interesting that they picked those two countries in particular, India and China. to visible minority countries. After this happened, CBSA agents were also making up stories that Indian and Chinese citizens were selling fake documents for Canadian immigration process right outside of consulates in India and China, which is completely untrue. This did not happen. Now, in regards to reforms that can be taken to create a more fair and just immigration process in Canada regarding combating Eurocentrism in the Canadian immigration process, there's simple things like CBSA must be held accountable by the government and by the judiciary when it violates international laws regarding asylum seekers arriving in Canada and having the right to seek asylum here. The arresting of these asylum seekers is a complete violation of the UNHCR and the 1951 Convention. On top of that, we cannot presume that citizens are guilty before they even apply for any sort of visas or applications to come to Canada. We can't put them on red flags lists because we believe that maybe they're conspiring to commit marriage fraud. On top of that, the swap program, all we have to do is listen to the Jamaican workers themselves. They've tried to lobby the government for healthcare rights to include unionization and higher wages. Also, NGOs on their behalf are speaking with the government and trying to start conversations over delivering permanent residency to these types of workers, or even fast tracks to Canadian citizenship. Some Canadian scholars are even calling for the abolishment of the swap program. And lastly, the point system is completely unfair and needs to be reevaluated on a continent-to-continent basis. Abu-Laban's criticism is absolutely correct. There's no way that you can compare colonized groups to their colonizers in terms of immigration. It should be looked at on a continent-to-continent basis. And so far, there are your reforms. Thank you so much.